Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. Today we are going to discuss about those investigations which had been made public by the Royal Canada Mounted Police regarding Indian state sponsorship of terrorism on foreign soils, especially in the wake of the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Sikh Canadian on the Canadian soil. Last year we saw Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that the authorities in Canada had credible evidence regarding Indian government's involvement in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Then there was, again, as the pattern has developed of the Indian authorities, they denied those accusations. Most recently, we have seen there being expulsions by the Canadian authorities of the Indian diplomats. Of course, that led to a tit-for-tat move by the Indian authorities as well. Regarding this particular move by the Canadian authorities of publicly sharing the findings of those investigations into the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and also the kind of pattern that we have also seen developing on the part of Indian authorities rather than helping out or supporting in the investigations of that particular killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. There has been a pattern of denial on the part of the Indian authorities. Not only this, there has been a sinister media campaign against Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as well. To discuss all this, what sort of diplomatic fallout which has already happened, what sort of implications it is going to have on the further bilateral relationship between India and Canada, and how the Western countries are seeing India at the moment after these startling revelations. For all that, we are honored to be joined in the studio by Mr. Agha Iqrar Haroon, expert in international relations. Mr. Haroon, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Dr. Awais Bin Wasi, expert in Indian affairs. Dr. Wasi, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. On Skype, at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. G.R Baloch, former ambassador. Mr. Baloch, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Mr. Haroon. Now, publicly, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police has shared these investigation findings. Isn't it an extraordinary move to share it publicly? It means there is some sort of a concrete evidence at the hands of the Indian authorities, but we have seen, again, the Indian authorities as well as their media repeatedly says that Canadian authorities haven't even shared the evidence before, and even now it is preposterous.
Look, this is not only Canada, or they cannot only, you can say, target the Prime Minister of Canada, because information, first of all, crop up through Five Eyes, which are really eyes of NATO forces in Indo-Pacific. And if I'm not wrong, the first information came from New Zealand, that India is involved in Canada in trans-border terrorism. So from there, things started gathering, and all intelligence agencies within Canada start working, and they got all information. That time, fortunately for India and unfortunately for the globe, the Indian origin Prime Minister was sitting in United Kingdom, because links were directly from Canada to UK and then going through this Eastern Europe. He actually hid everything, the former Prime Minister of UK. So things start gathering through United States. United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, they decided to share with people. This is what happened. So this is not the only Canadian Prime Minister is involved or Canada is involved. They are wasting their time to target Canada and Canadian Prime Minister. Things are almost shared with everybody who is an important part of NATO. And they know what India is doing. We had been crying since ages. We were sharing our dossiers. Nobody was believing us. But no, it happened with them, and they know how to handle it.
Right. Dr. Wasi, what is this story? Could you bring a little bit of historical perspective regarding this assassination that happened on the Canadian soil? Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a leading a Sikh Canadian national who was assassinated on the Canadian soil. And then last year we saw Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau coming out in the public saying on the floor of the House that they've got credible evidence regarding the Indian government officials' involvement in that particular assassination. How did this all happen?
You know, 1 year back in September 2023, this unfortunate incident happened when this gentleman, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, Canadian citizen with Indian origin, he was assassinated. And since then, Canadian Prime Minister, after gathering evidence from the intelligence agencies, publicly said that they had credible and irrefutable evidence against Indian not only the non-state actors, but Indian state apparatus. They are involved in the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. So since then, there was some diplomatic sharing, through diplomatic channels, sharing of information and evidences. They were being given by Canada to Indian administration. But after 1 year, there was no positive response from Delhi administration. So ultimately, Justice Trudeau had to say publicly, and as very rightly pointed out by Agha, that it's not only that Prime Minister's opinion, it is along with the five eyes, all the mainstream political parties of Canada. Elections are coming, they are soon expected to be held. So in that elections, despite the fractured political spectrum in Canada, we see that all the major political parties, they are behind the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in that sense that one of the leader, new Democratic Party leader, Jagmeet Singh, he was of the view that prosecution should be started against these people who are involved, including the diplomats who were involved in that this activity of sabotage and activity of this killing and other things also, because what they were doing is that they were gathering information, intelligence information, and they are sending to New Delhi. And the second head of the party, the Conservative Party, and according to some reports, he might be the next Prime Minister. Some of the polls that they project that he might be the next Prime Minister. So he is of the view, and he expressed serious concern, and he says that despite having differences on political issues, so we are one on this agenda, that there should not be any interference on Canadian soil. So keeping this, all this, in view, I think that this is a blatant violation by India and breach of sovereignty of Canadian state. So this is basically the whole context.
Right. Very important points that you have made. We have seen that sinister media campaign against Justin Trudeau and the Canadian authorities, specifically talking about the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. The Indian media had been trying to create a narrative that is a political opportunist. Now, the facts that you have shared with our viewers, that there are a number of political parties, despite there is a politically fractured spectrum over there in Canada just before the elections, but there is a broader consensus, there is a broader concern that is being expressed by a number of parties over there as well regarding the Indian involvement in such type of acts. I'll come back to you to take your deeper view regarding as to how this particular narrative has been built against what Justin Trudeau had shared last year. This time around, again, the Canadian authorities have come up with strong evidence. Let me go towards Mr. G.R Baloch. Mr. Baloch, now the expulsion of the diplomats by Canada, how do you look at that particular move? Firstly, and sharing the findings of the investigations publicly, how do you look at that?
I think it's quite a serious step that a government takes, technically speaking or diplomatically speaking, that it is just not the suspicion, it's just not the accusation, it's just not a political ploy as the Indians now are trying to make it. When a government, which is an important Western power, member of the G7, member of the Five Eyes, so it could not go for this diplomatic it's normally not done in case there's even a little saving grace for the accused. So I think the evidence was irrefutable, and it was definitely a infringement on the sovereignty of Canada, and that is what has hurt them. And I think it's a very, very strong message to India that if it wants to have a some of new birth at the G20, G7, G8, that they want to have it, this kind of a behavior is simply not acceptable. And I think this is a very, very strong message that a country can give it. Expelling
a very important point made. I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. Now the expulsion, is it only a symbolic move? Is there only a message embedded in it? Or does it have any sort of a practical implication, particularly for the understanding of the general masses? Expelling the diplomats, what does that basically signify? Is it carrying only a symbolic message?
No, it is not. It is actually the rupture of the diplomatic relations between the two countries. Actually, it signifies, underlines, and kind of tangibly seen that the diplomatic relations have ruptured. Because as I said, this is an extreme action that a state is compelled to really take after they have irrefutable evidence of certain behavior of a state which is not in accord with the normal behavior expected of any state against another state or with another state.
Point is well taken. I just want to carry forward with the discussion from this particular, I just want to build the discourse from this particular point. You are of the view that it is a rupture of the diplomatic relations between Canada and India. Just for the understanding, for the general masses, if somebody at a diplomatic level in a foreign country is involved in such type of acts, such type of heinous acts, of which there happens to be an irrefutable evidence. Now, what do the diplomatic protocols actually put forward regarding, is expulsion sufficient, or those people who have been involved in such type of heinous acts, shouldn't they be brought behind the bars?
No, actually, what happens is that diplomatic immunity is granted to the diplomat by the host country as per the Geneva Protocol on diplomatic relations. So probably they cannot be arrested as such, but they can be expelled. But if there is a direct involvement of any diplomat, then the host government asks the sending government to waive the diplomatic immunity of that very individual. So I think if Canada has zeroed on any person who was there in Canada, they would have asked for waiving of the immunity of that very diplomat. But they have still not gone to that extent, which would be complete rupture. It is quite a rupture, but if a person with a diplomatic immunity of a state, sending a state is arrested, and the host government asks the sending government to waive the diplomatic immunity, that is a very, very serious issue.
Point well taken. From this point onwards, Mr. Baloch, now this particular statement given by RCMP Commissioner, let me quote that. Investigations have revealed that Indian diplomats and consular officials based in Canada leverage their official positions to engage in clandestine activities such as collecting information for the government of India, either directly or through their proxies and other individuals who acted voluntarily or through coercion. The information collected for the government of India is then used to target the members of the South Asian community. Isn't it well established already? So why wouldn't the Canadian authorities be asking the Indian authorities, rather than expelling their diplomats, asking the Indian authorities to waive their diplomatic immunity?
I think there's a whole process, actually, of prosecution in any country, but one knows a little bit of Canadian prosecution, and especially if a diplomatic agent, it's called diplomatic agent, the person who has the diplomatic immunity, is a technical name, is seen to be involved, and there is a decision, because it again is a political decision by the Canadian government, that how far they want to take this entire saga. Where do they want to stop or not to stop? So I think what happens, even in worst case scenario, they would keep something open. For example, they can ask the Indian government that we have given you this way out, that we have expelled your 5-6 people, but Mr. A, Mr. B, or Mr. C, or all three of them are directly involved, and here is the evidence. So we would ask you to prosecute this person under your law, because he is an Indian national. So if the Indian government refuses, and if refuses, which India is doing at this point of time, then there are several other leverages, that different options that can be used to kind of compel.
I'll come back to you, Mr. G.R Baloch. I'll come back to you to understand how those other options could actually be utilized if India continues to refuse. Mr. Haroon, now, there's been a pattern on the part of the Indian authorities. Last year, we saw that this particular bilateral relationship actually hit the rock bottom between Canada and India when Justin Trudeau on the floor of the House said they had credible evidence of India's involvement, Indian government officials' involvement in Hardeep Singh Nijjar's murder. Even now, after the expulsions, rather than acknowledging that Indian authorities are going to or had been cooperating with the Canadian authorities into the investigations, they are saying that these allegations are preposterous. What is this basic pattern? How do you analyze that pattern of the Indian authorities, despite the concrete evidence available at the hand of Canadian authorities?
Look, they cannot actually, they are doing this operation, trans-border terrorism operation, since long. They would definitely never accept that. This is not a matter of only Canada. We have found some information about an attempt of killing someone in United States also. Then the Sikhs living in United Kingdom, they are crying since almost 10 years. Their lives are under threats. So, if you remember, an Indian Eastern Punjab rapper, very popular, Sidhu Moosewala, was gunned down in Indian Punjab, but his assassination was paid from Canadian soil, and Indian intelligence agencies were involved, and they didn't want to kill him inside Canada. So when he was on vacation to his grandmother, he was killed over there, but operation was executed from Canada. And these information were, his family also accused. Why? Because Sidhu Moosewala was releasing a very sensitive album over this a kind of Khalistan movement. Or you can say in 2024, this year, he had a plan to release this album in 2024 about 1984 massacre of Sikhs in New Delhi and in Indian Punjab. So he was very popular rapper. Millions of people follow him. So the moment he was working on, and he came to Indian Punjab for working on that assignment, he was killed. So this is not a matter of one country only. So they are doing it, of course, by design. They would never ever accept that they are doing something like that, first of all. Secondly, I have a little difference of opinion with you. This is not a rupture. Actually, this is nothing. Because India had been caught directly involved in trans-border terrorism, but you can never find a word cross-border terrorism in any statement of the Canada or the United Kingdom or the America. So there is no rupture. If it could have been done, God forbid, be from Pakistan, we could have been tagged a terrorist, state-sponsored terrorism coming from Pakistan within one day. The whole Western media could have started targeting Pakistan as a terrorist state. So nothing happened. This was actually there was a pressure within the Canada, because many of the Canadian member of parliament are Sikhs, and they are those, or the second generation of those who left India in 1984, and they basically migrated to Canada and the United Kingdom to save their lives. Though I mean this diaspora is very strong, which is basically which saved their life and left India for Canada. So these people are operating over there, and they are trying to expose what India is doing, but the governments are again trying to hush.
So
this is my opinion. I can be wrong.
Mr. G.R Baloch was of the view that
Yeah.
it's a rupture as far as the bilateral
So I have
relationship
given
between
my
Canada.
statement.
Okay, let me take this very interesting point to Dr. Wasi. Is it the rupture of the diplomatic relations, or do you also think, as Mr. Haroon is saying, that it should have been something like that if the Canadian government or the Western nations would have termed India being involved in state sponsorship of terrorism? Am I correct, Mr.
Yes,
Haroon?
absolutely.
To my understanding, it's in fact a great setback, and that could be termed as a rupture also, because the way that in Canada expelled the whole diplomatic mission, including the ambassador, and following up the way that investigations are being taken up, and the way other countries, including New Zealand and Australia and United Kingdom and United States of America, they are fully backing, and all the political parties within Canada, they are also behind Justin Trudeau. So keeping this thing in view, it seems that it's a great rupture, because if you see, for example, within the party in the political spectrum, if you see conservative party, that has always been considered as pro-India party. So if it has taken a stand against Indian administration on this assassination of Hardeep Singh Najjar, and Justin Trudeau is also against, and all the opinion leaders within Canada. So I think that keeping all these views, we can say that it's a great rupture.
But don't you think the Western nations, after such type of startling revelations, when they've got that concrete evidence against India being directly involved, the government and its agents being directly involved in trans-border terrorism, so what's the harm in calling this state
Yes, they should.
state sponsor
Exactly.
of
Yes,
terrorists?
you're very much right that they should be, it should be termed as the state-sponsored terrorism, because many of the credible papers, including Washington Post, they in their editorial they mentioned that Canadian official requesting anonymity mentioned that the Indian official or the Indian senior person is basically the Home Minister Amit Shah. And they also mentioned the name of National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. So, and that person who is being charged by the United States of America, that Vikas Yadev, he was a part of the cabinet, doing not cabinet as a berth, he was not sharing, but he was an official in the cabinet secretariat. So keeping all these linkages in view, so I think that there is a clear evidence of state-sponsored terrorism and linkage between the state and those people who have really executed and perpetrated that thing.
So do you think the Western nations are shying away from calling India as a state sponsor?
Yes, that is because of their interest, because of the geopolitical consideration, because
So
of their
is it just because of the public pressure?
the Asia Pacific strategy.
That these revelations been made public is just because of the public pressure?
Yes, no, I think that that the way, for example, the United States has taken a charge. Canada is also doing it. Of course, there are interests, and because of those interests, they are not taking that position which they should have taken, right? But in future, if these things continue, this cross-border Indian terrorism, if it continues, so I think that they will be compelled to take some stance against India.
Okay, so you already talked about there is a broader consensus among the political parties despite a fractured political spectrum over there in Canada. Why do you think, firstly, why would Indians call Justin Trudeau as a political opportunist? They've tried to create that narrative through their media. The sinister campaign, the disinformation campaign goes on. And do you think it's going to serve its purpose? Is it going to really deflect the attention from those serious allegations?
No, absolutely not. That is, not the case. I came across some Indian, analyst and on Indian channel. They were saying the same thing, that because of the political considerations and because of the upcoming federal elections, Justin Trudeau is doing so. But if you see the whole political landscape, if you see the whole media landscape of Toronto, Ottawa, Canada, so you will come to know that this is not, the position taken by Justin Trudeau for some political mileage to capitalize some electoral politics. There is some other reason, and that reason is that they have they are united, all the political parties, major political parties, as well as the opinion leaders, intelligentsia, about the interference, external interference in Canada, and they are very much committed to protect the sovereignty and integrity of Canada. So I don't think that they are doing for political mileage. This argument, which India is trying to project and India is trying to advance, it doesn't hold water. It seems unfounded if we look deep into the political dynamics of Canada.
Right, Mr. Baloch. Now, Canada's rapid response mechanism, which monitors state-sponsored disinformation in its report, has talked about how there has been a sinister campaign on the part of Indian authorities using social media platforms as well as the media in order to create a narrative about Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, as being a political opportunist. Now, Dr. Wasi is of the view it's not, the reality is totally different on the ground, as there is a broader concern among the different political parties within Canada as to what India has been up to on the Canadian soil.
Yeah, I think I entirely agree with him that the counter narrative now being kind of paddled by the social media brigades of BJP. Let's not forget that Modi himself is the byproduct of that very, very strong, well-greased social media brigade when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat. And that sustains. So over the years, since he has been the Prime Minister the third time now, that science he has really mastered himself. I'm sure we know that he was a leader who used to use the Twitter the most in the world, one of the few who would use it more. So I think I'll not be surprised that the Indian government would try to deflect this and try to influence the public opinion in Canada and divide it and polarize it. Obviously, they will not succeed, but for sure, all these counter narratives are part of their effort to influence or create an impression and create a social pressure on the Canadian government not to proceed or not to proceed further, because as I said, it is not the end of the story. Expulsion is just one step towards the final. Final would be when the charges are brought in the court, the people, they named names, and if the names are really taken, the story could go on, the traces could go on quite close to Delhi, which is a problem with for India. If the two stories are then combined together, one being followed in the US, United States, the other in Canada, imagine what kind of diplomatic embarrassment and what kind of damage it would do to India as a country which claims to be the biggest democracy, the liberal, and so on and so forth. So I think that facade would come down, that mask has come down, but it will be the ugly face of the majoritarian, ultra-nationalist BJP rule in India really has been exposed.
Mr. Baloch, okay, so here is the scenario. Was there any sort of a possibility of any sort of a damage control on the part of the Indian authorities when Justin Trudeau last year on the floor of the House came up with this, saying that they've got the credible evidence? Was there any possibility? Had there been any sort of introspection within the ranks of the Indian authorities? Had they gone in cooperating with the Canadian authorities? Was there a possibility of a damage control at that time?
I think that time also, and I still believe the only way, honorable way for India is to accept the responsibility ask for pardon, regret, if at all, and punish those who are involved in the uh, cross-border terrorism on the name of the state of India. We must. None of our friends are also mentioning. I would dare mention it that we have seen on our land some Kashmiri leaders being assassinated, some Sikhs being assassinated, and very much the traces are where the two murders, one in Canada and the other attempt in the US, lead the investigators. So that be the case. It means there is a, because what happens is that you can only bring in the charges against a state when there is a evidence to show that is a state policy. So I think this is where the rub is. If Canadian or the US prosecutors are able to establish this, that there is a pattern and there's a stated state policy to do what their operators were doing. So it is not an individual. It is the state behind that criminal act. And that is a big charge against any country. And India has to reply, has to respond, has to be answerable. If not today, tomorrow, day after. That's my prediction. That's my assessment that India will have to either regret or pay a huge diplomatic price.
Right, Mr. Haroon. Now, Mr. Baloch is of the view that there is still a possibility of damage control. The Indian authorities should come out and ask for the pardon and cooperate with the Canadian authorities. Is there any possibility of that? When Mr. Baloch is also of the view that it is a stated state policy. So, would there be any possibility of Indian authorities considering that option, going for a pardon?
Definitely not. They could share information. They avoided that. No, even they wanted to. There is no need. Time has gone. India is not doing only in Pakistan or in Canada or in UK. Even India is doing everywhere there is a Sikh, and even in Eastern Europe. We are forgetting one another character who was arrested in Czech Republic. So, because Czech Republic is a target market for the Sikh students, you know, thousands of Sikh students are studying over there for their master degrees and PhD degrees. So, even India is has engrossed in Eastern Europe for killing people. So, entire world has spread. How can he accept it that my networking has become so huge? It's not possible. So, and India won't lose anything.
What would it take to dismantle such a huge network?
Why it should not, because India.
What would it take to dismantle if
First
there
of all,
is such a huge network?
Nobody can dismantle, because nobody is going to penalize India. Would Canada stop its trade with India? Would India be sanctioned? Would US would sanction India? Is there any chance UK would sanction India? Nobody. Nothing happens actually. There are people, they died. There is a pressure within the Canadian Parliament because there are so many Sikhs. After 2 or 3, 4 years, everybody would forget that. And one day, India would become with a book, a huge book written by someone else, the India networking world over. So it is actually, it helps India to elevate India as a very strong international power. Don't forget this.
Dr. Wasi, 2 points we've collected through this discourse. Firstly, is there still a possibility, if by any chance Indian authorities think of making a damage control?
I don't think so.
And secondly, if the network has gone so big, is there any possibility, or is there any way to dismantle it or reduce the impact at least?
You know, the first thing is that the possibility. I don't think that there is any possibility, keeping in view the rogue conduct of India across the border with regard to these terrorist activities. And second thing is that if you see that what Sikh activists they were doing over there, they were holding referendums, and that referendum that indicates, the Sikh population, they talk about their separate homelands, not only separate identity but separate homeland. So I don't think that even credible evidence have already been shared. So India, India might give up and might do regret and might apologize for whatever India did it. But however, what we can do is, or what the international organizations and concerned organizations, they should take up this issue, because this is not a one case. This is a consistent pattern over there that we will find here. That look at the United States. With United States, India has strategic partnership with that. So look, what India is doing with its strategic partnership, that they are killing their citizens.
So Europe, the view should serve as an eye-opener for the Western
And
nations.
if you see, for example, everywhere, Indian Prime Minister, Indian External Minister, whether that is SCO, whether that is G20, whether that is United Nations General Assembly, they always talk about terrorism, terrorism, terrorism. But irony is that they themselves are promoting. The irony is that they themselves are doing cross-border terrorism. These are the two countries, and 5 countries, other 5 eyes, they are, buying this concern which Canada is sharing. And what India did recently in Pakistan, 20 individuals, they have been assassinated. And all the plannings, they have been done in another country, external country. So I think keeping these, things in view, I think that India should be exposed in the concerned forums internationally, that if this thing continues with a country that wields nuclear power, so I think that it could be quite dangerous for the peace of the world in the region.
So Mr. Baloch, your quick last comments. We have to wrap up the show over here. Unfortunately, we're short of time. As to, is there any possibility of doing away with or dismantling such a huge network, as Mr. Haroon is of the view that it's going to be an uphill task?
Well, dismantling a kind of a terrorist network or a network of their intelligence agencies, operatives, to eliminate the political opponents has been seen in the history of statecraft. And we've also seen that they have withdrawn from the world. I'm sure we all know KGB and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's not possible that they will not wind up. But what is required is sufficient diplomatic and political pressure on India to do this and follow the rules, follow the interstate, honorable and internationally recognized interstate.
Thank you so very much, Mr. G.R Baloch, former ambassador, joining us on Skype. We really appreciate that. In the studio, we were joined by Mr. Agha Iqrar Haroon, expert in international relations. Mr. Haroon, thank you very much for your time. Dr. Awais Bin Wasi, expert in Indian affairs, thank you very much for your time also, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.